Donald, nice to see you.
Hi, Greta.
Okay, Donald, in my prior life as a lawyer, I did a lot of poverty law, and I have a lot of attention on trying to figure out that, horrible problem, the scourge of poverty in this country. And I'm curious, how has the Obama administration done, in your opinion, on trying to reverse this horrible trend?
Well, you really have to give them an F for failure, because the fact is that there's no incentive to work. People are getting welfare checks that are bigger than what they could earn, and people are just saying, hey, I'm not going to work. There's no incentive, absolutely. So it's a disaster. You look at New York and various other places, and the numbers are just atrocious.
Well, don't you think that the Obama administration, or does anyone looking at these numbers, would be horrified? And I know I've heard the numbers on food stamps, and it's like, if people really need food stamps, we ought to give them food stamps. But the fact that it's sort of exploding, it does call into question whether or not we're going in the right direction and dealing with this very painful problem to many Americans.
Well, the welfare numbers are incredible, and you have many states where the welfare number, the money you get, is far greater than what you'd get if you had a job. So people are just saying, and I guess you can't blame them. It's not good, but how can you blame them? They're saying, why should we work? We might as well just pick up welfare.
What is your assessment of President Obama's intensity of working on the problem of welfare in this country?
Well, I don't think there is an intensity. I think maybe if the intensity is there, it's toward getting people as much money as they can. Ultimately, the country is going to fail with that. You've seen that many times over the decades and over the years and over the centuries. I mean, the country will actually fail. You just can't go on like this.
Every time the Republican Party talks about poverty, there is sort of the pushback that the Republicans are cruel or don't care about poor people, and they're turning their back on them. Is that a fair criticism of the Republican Party or not?
Well, it's certainly a criticism, and people do talk about cutting back on Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security, and it is a criticism far more so of the Republican Party. I mean, frankly, what the Republican Party should be talking about is success and making this country successful so that they can afford certain programs that are good programs, basically. You get rid of the fraud and abuse. In these programs, there are some great programs. Social Security happens to be one of them. But, you can't have these programs if you're going to have a failing country, which is what we've got right now. We have a failing country. We have tremendous deficits. We owe $17 trillion. And you can't do the things that you want to do with people and taking care of people. What the Republicans should be doing is talking positively instead of cutting back all the time. If this country were the country that it should be, it would be so successful that it could take better care of people, and you wouldn't have to be cutting back.
How would you inspire and motivate and give opportunity to these inner cities, especially like Detroit, where people simply don't have skills, they don't have opportunity, their schools are falling apart, and it's just it's just growing. It's not getting better. How would you change that?
Well, probably, look, this is not a new problem. This is a problem that's been going on for many, many decades in this country. We have cities that have been bad for years and years, and they've done tax incentives, they've done work programs, they've done all sorts of things, and nothing seems to happen. Detroit is a very good example. I mean, Detroit is a disaster area. There's no question about it. Now, what happens, we'll have to see. But perhaps you do the tax havens, perhaps you do tremendous incentives of business going into Detroit, and you, instead of paying a big tax, which of course we're one of the most heavily taxed countries in the world, you don't pay tax, so you pay very small taxes, and you do something to get Detroit and other cities like it. I mean, Detroit is just emblematic. You have many, many cities. I could name them, but I don't want to embarrass people, but they will be next. You have many cities in the same situation as Detroit.
All right, since I asked you the Republican question, let me ask a Democratic question. Have the Democrats served the poor people in this nation? They're the ones in power, and they have the White House. Have they actually helped the very people that came out in large numbers for President Obama?
Well, I think long-term the answer is absolutely not. Short-term, sure, because you look at welfare, you look at what's going on, you look at food stamps, you look at all the things that are happening. But long-term, it's not sustainable by the country. So I think you could say on a short-term basis the answer is yes. People are going to vote for them because they're getting free lunch, free dinner, free breakfast, and free everything else.
Let me turn to the question of China. There's a new document out that at least it's written about that China is criticizing, of course, our Western ideals. Your thought about this document? First of all, what is it?
Well, I think China is just, and I've been saying this to you for 2 years and everybody else that would listen, China is just laughing at how stupid our leadership is. They can't believe they're getting away. I deal with many people from China. I've made fantastic deals with people from China. They cannot believe how stupid our leadership is. So when you look at China, what they're doing with our jobs, you know, we talk about Apple or we talk about all of the things. Well, they're made in China. The Apple is this wonderful thing that happens to be made in China. We're not really the big beneficiary from that and from so many other things. So they've taken our jobs. They loan us back money. We're rebuilding their cities. We're rebuilding bridges. We're rebuilding everything. We're rebuilding China. And without us, believe me, we have all the chips, because without us, that whole thing would come to an immediate halt. And I do very well with China. I have many friends in China, many of the biggest business people in China. They cannot believe that they can get away with what they're... And this is an off-the-record statement to me, which I guess is not so off the record. They cannot believe that they're getting away with what they're getting away with, Greta.
We turned to another topic. Earlier today, you tweeted about Stuart Stevens tweeted, "He did a horrible job for Mitt," meaning Governor Mitt Romney. "Is a refund in order? Sadly, Stuart is a disaster." And then earlier you said that he's expected to work for Governor Christie in a 2016 run. Explain all this.
Well, I thought he did a terrible job for Mitt Romney, absolutely terrible. I think that was an election that should have been won. You know, Mitt keeps saying, and other people say, that the second debate and the third debate, where it wasn't that Obama was good. He wasn't good, but Mitt was terrible. But they said you have to be really nice, you have to pull back, and you have to do certain things. Look, the campaign was a disaster. That was a campaign that should have been won. I don't know Stuart Stevens from a hole in the wall. I don't know what he looks like. But I will say this, whoever ran that campaign, that is not the person I would want running my campaign if I were running.
All right. Well, you say you don't know him, but you do describe him as a disaster. So there's a really sort of very strong
result was
words.
a disaster, Greta. The result was a total disaster. That was an election that shouldn't have been lost, and it was an election that wasn't even that close. I mean, there was a big spread between victory and defeat. But that was something that shouldn't have been lost. The unemployment numbers, which even if you look at them now, I mean, the unemployment numbers the real numbers are 15, 16, 17%. They don't show that. They show 7.4%. But the real numbers, and that's the people that have quit looking, you got to add them in, obviously. But the real numbers are probably close to 17%.
Of course, so that sort of hooks us around to where we started this discussion on sort of poverty in the inner city. But let me ask you this question. In your tweets, it seems to suggest that you believe that Governor Chris Christie is running for president in 2016. Is that what you think?
Oh, I think so, absolutely. And I think probably based on everything I've read and heard, he's going to use a similar group that Mitt used. And, of course, Chris is a lot different than Mitt, but I think using Stuart Stevens and using the group of people that so badly ran Mitt Romney's campaign, I think is a disaster for Chris.
You know, that's sort of an interesting thing, especially since you've had such success with The Apprentice and hiring and firing. It's always sort of interesting to me that I would sort of look to hire someone who's had an enormous track record of winning.
Yeah.
Even if it's unfair to hold a loss against someone, that's what that's who I would look for.
Well, you can learn from losses, but that loss was really catastrophic. That was a loss that just should never have happened, ever. And such bad advice when you listen to the advice that was given. And I happen to like Mitt Romney a lot. I think he's a good man. I think he really would have been actually a very good president, but he did not resonate in terms of the voter. He just didn't resonate. And a lot of the blame is being put on Stuart Stevens and other people, but he was the head of the campaign. Now, you have to really put the blame on Mitt Romney for listening to the things. I'd look at Mitt coming out of a store wearing a cowboy uniform or outfit, and, it just wasn't him. It looked so false. And somebody was giving him just horrible advice.
Off the top of your head, do you have sort of a gut feeling whether or not you think Governor Christie would make a good president or not?
Well, I know him very well, and I think he is going to have not an easy race to get in, but certainly I think he would be good, and I think he would be a lot better than what we have right now. What we have right now is a disaster.
Donald, always nice to see you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.